Welcome to the podcast, A Year of Bach. My name is Evan Goldfine, and today I welcome the ballet dancer and dance critic, Faye Arthurs. Faye spent 2 decades with the New York City Ballet, dancing the works of George Balanchine, Jerome Robbins, and Christopher Wheeldon at Lincoln Center and around the world. She originated a role in Christopher Wheeldon's Scenes de Ballet when she was still a student at the School of American Ballet and danced Robbins' famous adaptations of the Goldberg Variations. We'll be talking a lot about that today. Faye has since retired from professional dancing and now writes dance criticism for the Fjord Review, and she is based in New York City and today from New Hampshire. So Faye, welcome. I'd like to start by talking about counting as a ballet performer. So the works that you danced were choreographed to through composed pieces. In the moment of dancing, what's your relation to the music as it's being performed in the pit?
That's a great question. And it is really dependent upon which piece you're talking about, because some pieces of music are much more difficult to count than others, to play than others. There's a lot of ballet. Ballet originally started with using so much very even, simple 4/4 time structures. The Petipa ballets, the great ballets, Swan Lake, Sleeping Beauty, you really don't have to count those so much. It's very even. It's 3 repeats of one phrase, and then there's like a tag into the next thing. It's very like you do this one step left, and then you do a transition into the next sequence. There's not much counting that you have to do.
So you're thinking more in phrases for certain pieces and in counting for others. So it's depending on the choreography and the music itself.
It really is. A ballet like the Goldberg Variations, we're counting, it's a lot of sixes. We're sticking with the musical meter from Bach, but then within that, there's a lot of slow walking sections where you really don't have to be counting. Like, even though you're stepping on every note, you're not in your head always counting.
So you have the tempo in your head, the
Right.
tempo's in your body and you're going step. And is there a musical cue that you're waiting for to do your next?
It's just at a certain point, you just know these things. Like yes, there is a cue and a count for everything, but you don't have to actively be counting in your head all the time. You know what I mean? You can be thinking about all sorts of things. You can be thinking about what you're having for dinner after the show at a certain point and certain dances. Like, it's just so through your body, almost like a breath or a pulse, if you know the sequences and they're not that complicated. That being said, you're dancing Balanchine to choreography to Hindemith or
Right.
von Webern, and you are counting 21, 17s, what you were in your head the whole time you were counting. Actually, I was going to talk maybe with you later about Concerto Barocco, which is Balanchine's famous ballet to Bach. And that is one where you can tune out for some sequences, and then you really have to be counting hard when you're going in counterpoint against people counting differently from you doing a similar step. So I feel when you're new in New York City Ballet, because we have so much rep, you're counting all the time. And then when you're like 20 years in, you don't need to count. Most of Barocco, you're not actively counting. You're thinking about things, or you could be counting. You're humming the melody, something like that. But I'm not in my head going 1, 2, 3.
Is that hard? Yeah, of course. Is it harder for a counterpoint piece because maybe the melody is a little bit more obscure? Are you focusing more on, in Tchaikovsky, you can kind of da 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 da.
Exactly.
Okay, you know exactly where you're going to go from one to the other. But when you're moving a counterpoint, the melody can sometimes be obscured. So does that make it trickier for you on stage?
Well, you're going against it purposefully. And that was really Balanchine's great game. It's like you're carving your own channel into the score. And I think that's part of what makes Balanchine endlessly dazzling. It's the audience doesn't necessarily know that we're counting 5s against 8s or 5s against 6s, or that half of the stage is in a 3-count phrase and half of the stage is in a 4-count phrase, but the music isn't in 6. So we're both
Right.
we're both not in the composer's intended speed limit or time signature. So it's really, people are like, what is it about that keeps me coming back to Barocco or something? And I think it's that. I think when you finally can start uncovering some of those games that he's playing, it's just, for me, dancing it was endlessly fun because you felt like you were stamping your own time signature into a piece. It was like if we are switching roles in a ballet, you might be feeling different things are accentuated when you're cutting against a score. You feel it through your body differently. It's because your body links up so much with breath. And for me, and I think for most New York City Ballet dancers, at least, because music really is the focus at City Ballet, and more than a lot of companies. And modern pieces, for example, where there is no music, or the piece is not choreographed to music, or it's improvisational, you can do whatever. But at City Ballet, the music is the top of the pyramid. And so we're all there because that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to like make music visible in a sense. And I think these little cross currents in the tempos and counting against the actual time signature of the piece is part of just, cutting your way through something. It's fun. It just feels like you have a different relationship to a piece of music once you've done different tracks through it, different step tracks through it. I don't know. I found it really fun.
When you're on stage and you're dancing a 3-part and your compatriots also on the stage, you're dancing in 4, and the music's in 6. Is there something where you have to tune out your other dancers on stage so you don't fall into their rhythm?
For sure. There's a lot of tuning out, but I thought what was more interesting to me was the more I did Barocco, and you've got the 3s versus the 4s versus the 6s, the more that you can hear it all at the same time is the most fun. And you're like, and when you're going, but you're predicting. And because of the nature of the step, you're meeting up on certain things, doing the same step because things overlap. And it's just very fun when you feel like you can see it all, like a chess game.
Yeah. One of the beauties of about digging deeper into Bach's music is that he's going with 3 and 4-part fugues, and you can hear the individual lines and also how they're working together. So in a way, it sounds like Balanchine and Robbins are able to reify that same thing that we're listening to for the different parts in the fugues into the music itself as they're choreographing on the stage.
Completely. Robbins was very, very strong on the fugal form. There's a Benjamin Britten ballet. What is it called? It's the Guide to the Orchestra. Oh my God,
the children's
Fanfare. Yeah.
Okay.
Fanfare.
Yeah.
And the finale is a fugue, and every dancer is an instrument in the orchestra, and in the fugue they're doing the track of their instrument, and it's a really great primer for children, but it's fun to do as well because you're like you're a visual representation of the orchestra, and you're doing those lines. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. When certain pieces are conducted in certain styles, the orchestra's playing, they have to play Tchaikovsky different from Bach, different from Hindemith and Arvo Part, whoever. Yeah. But do you find that the orchestras are playing very much on the beat to assist the dancers? Is there a conductorial technique that they're using to help you?
Yeah, this is the problem with conducting for dance, right? It's always considered like a lesser to conduct for dance is, I know conductors, it's not the most prestigious thing, right? To conduct for a dance because there are accommodations that the dancers need. And I was playing different Goldberg iterations this week, interpretations, thinking about I don't have the video of the ballet here. I'm not in New York.
Sure.
So it's been like 12 years since I've danced Goldberg. Let me see what I remember. And the Goldberg is such a personal piece, and the tempi can Glenn Gould's first and last record are
very different pieces.
Very different pieces. And both versions, the 55 and the 81, would be undanceable for the Robbins choreography.
Yes.
The first is way too fast. The second is way too slow.
Yes.
He would be like just limping around. And the first one, the aria is almost like an allegro. Yes, there are the Goldberg Variations for Jerome Robbins is unconducted. It's just a pianist off on the corner of the stage, and they have artistic license, but within the framework of they've been in the rehearsal rooms with us and they know the general tempi that we need. They know how high we can jump. They know how long we want to be in there in a lift, that kind of thing, how long we can turn for. We can't endlessly turn like they have experience with us. So it's not like the ballet pianists can just sit and do whatever they're feeling in the moment like a concert pianist could.
One feeling that I've had, I've seen the Goldbergs live a few times, NYCB, and there's always for me, I'm picky, there's a stiffness to those performances from the piano because I know that they're trying to accommodate the dancers, and to that end, there's very little license yeah, as you were saying, for the expressiveness that can come from a great performance of the Goldbergs, which I've listened to dozens over time. So, but the music's great, and I never really thought about it as, okay, the trill can go on for only so long because you can only twist for that many turns, or you can only jump. I guess there's a cue for coming up on the jump and then down again on the jump. How does that work?
It's just if you're too slow in an allegro jumping passage, if the music is too slow, we're just going to be lumbering. We won't be up in the air for so many in Goldberg, for sure. A lot of the choreography is, oh, you're up on this jump in this shape on this note. And if it's too slow, you're going to miss that shape on that note.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Regarding the Goldbergs, just for people context, this was choreographed by Jerome Robbins for the New York City Ballet in 1971. Goldbergs are long. It's 80 or 90 minutes. Very long by classical ballet standards. What made that different? Was this one of the kind of some of their more warhorse pieces like Nutcracker or Sleeping Beauty or Swan Lake? Those can go on longer also. Goldbergs feel different because it's not story-based, or maybe it's obliquely story-based. What are your memories about this particular? What about this is different from some of the other bigger pieces that you danced there?
The Goldberg is definitely, it's a special piece. It's not like a Nutcracker that's going to come back every year. It's not a big crowd pleaser.
I'm part of the crowd. I come. I'll get my ticket every time.
Okay, good. No, it brings out a certain very educated audience, but it's long. And I think classical music crowds are more accustomed to just sitting through a long piece of music. But the ballet, the format, it's just piano for a long time, for an hour and a half. And it's usually when they have people sitting for over an hour, there's an intermission, usually one other dance. And they always try to program Goldberg to begin, and then something super popular blockbuster closes. So people, if they accidentally bought a ticket for the they will have some sort of bombastic
candy at the end.
Yeah, candy, exactly. A little dessert after your extra long salad course or whatever. But the Goldberg was always a really special dance for us. To be in Goldberg was a great honor because it is this very beloved ballet for the dancers and for the company. And it's a special dance, and we loved it. It is funny in terms of personnel, though. It's even concert pianists sometimes do that big break in the middle before Variation 16. Jerome Robbins, actually, he has one full cast for the first 15 variations and then a second cast for...
And then they all come back at the very end, yeah, right?
Only a few dancers come back.
There's like a pair in the beginning, right?
Yeah. That is a funny role because you have this important first solo and then you have to wait around for an hour. You can go do a crossword puzzle or whatever you want. You get out of your shoes, your costume, everything, and then you check your watch and you come back to Helen and you put on point shoes and you go back out as the very last people to move at the end too, which it's a very funny part. But the rest of the first half cast can just go home. You could just go shower and leave, other than the principals. So the theme couple, and then they're like 6 principal roles. There are two pas de trois that anchor the first movement. And those people come back as part of the big, huge group finale at the end of part 2. But the rest of the people are just done. If they have another ballet, they're hanging around, or they're just home. They're already out to dinner. So it's such a long slog that Robbins changed out his personnel halfway through.
Yeah.
But I do think he was making a larger point. I think he really breaks, even in the way that this ballet is cast, but the first half is the younger kind of group, and then the younger principals, and then actually more senior corps, because it's a lot more featured. You're dancing the whole time. And then the second half is the mature principals, 3 principal couples who are like senior ballerinas and dancers, and then the very youngest corps, because it's a bigger group and it's more filler kind of stuff. So you're more like scenery for it. The first half is very intimate. Everyone feels like a character in the piece. In the second half, you have these 3 very polished, very mature, grand couples. And then you have it's a less humanized core, I would say, in the second half. It's interesting. I think Robbins breaks the ballet up into stages of life, really, like kind
Yes.
of childhood and then adulthood, or it's one generation looking at the next generation. But throughout the ballet, and especially the first half, has a lot of very childish moves. There are high fives, there's somersaults, there's some handstands, there's hands behind your back kind of struts. There are cookie cutter shapes. There's a lot of playfulness, cartwheel kinds of things. And then the second half, the principals are doing more virtuosic Alice Agon pirouettes, fouette turns, romantic pas de deux, which doesn't, the first half is, the pas de trois are the anchors. So it's not necessarily you've got one romance going on. It's a lot of exploration.
Playground. Yeah.
Yes, yes. And yeah, so I think Robbins was making more of a statement about generations and the stages of life with his breakup.
I feel the same way about the piece itself. There's something very youthful in the early parts, and then you have your teenage angst, and then later you have a midlife crisis, and then you come back to your youth again. So I've got the back half of the ballet to still live through my life. So were you familiar with the Goldbergs before? What was your relationship to Bach's music as you were coming up in your youth and ballet? And I guess I'm imagining that probably you were more drawn to, just as many people are in their youth, the more romantic side, the Tchaikovsky and even into Stravinsky. But I'd love to hear about how that played before.
My dad was always in a rock band, was always a drummer, grew up on a lot of Beatles and Stones and rock, classic rock or Pogues, a lot of Irish music. So I came to classical through my ballet training as a young child, but I just loved it and would then be like, oh my God, I'm obsessed with this Sleeping Beauty that we're doing. So then I got really into the music of it. And from there, for sure, I started listening to everything. And it's interesting because we don't dance to a lot of Bach at City Ballet. There's Goldberg, there's Barocco, of course. And then Robbins has 3 other ballets to Bach, and Balanchine has, you can't even count it. There's a section called Bach in Episodes, which is the Ricercata from Anton von Webern. And so even though that's Bach, like melodies and structure, it's not exactly Bach. And I was going through the rep trying to think of, we have to have something else. We did a ballet called Musagète by Boris Eifman, which was it was like a biography of Balanchine and his muses. And that was in like 2004. And in 2001, we had an Eliot Feld ballet called Organon, which was actually a fabulous, huge ballet to the Fantasia and Fugue, Toccata and Fugue, a couple different big selections. And it was very intense, very modern dance. But there's not a lot of Bach in City Ballet's rep. And I think there's something about Bach and the purity of it that like Balanchine didn't necessarily want to touch. He often said if a piece of music is too perfect, you shouldn't choreograph to it. He was trying to use kind of what he considered slighter pieces is what he said often. And so I think it's a shame because, for one thing, Concerto Barocco is one of his best ballets.
Yes.
What he could have done with that could have been tremendous. But for whatever reason, he didn't touch Bach a lot. And Robbins just the 4 ballets. And Goldberg was in 71. But then Robbins' other 3 ballets to Bach, he made in the very last year of his life. They were his last 3 ballets he ever made.
Oh,
so it is really interesting thinking about maturity and aging. Really, at the end of his life, Robbins was very drawn to Bach, even though he loved Bach forever. But he was more associated with Chopin, I think, his whole career. So I don't know. So for me, recreationally, Bach, yes, go see it whenever you can in performance. Put it on all the time. But I definitely cherished the few experiences I had and dancing to it because it's just wonderful to feel it through your bones.
How well did you learn these pieces in your bones? I know you touched a little bit earlier about you can learn the phrases. If it's Tchaikovsky, you know when a phrase is going to start and end. But did you have in your bones each note a full score, or really just the melody, or was it harmony? How did that work? I'm a very in my head kind of guy, so I can't imagine this working in my body also. How does that work on stage when you're listening and trying to coordinate everything? Do you know the score down?
Yes, you know the score, your sections of the score. In thinking about appearing on the show, I was like, oh God, do I remember Goldberg? And I thought to myself, okay, let's see, if you could just hum it in your head, what comes to you? And I could piece together just from cold, like at least a decade off, most of the theme, the aria, potted just from that. And then when I played a version that was close to the right tempo, the rest came back. So there's such a musical muscle memory that I'm always amazed at with dance, because I think, oh, I haven't been a part of this forever, and I'll be sitting in the audience. It'll be a revival of some ballet, and I start counting sevens. I'm like, why am I counting sevens? You just know, your history with the piece very, very deeply, very embodied, which is, I think, why I danced and why I loved to dance. But
Could you dig a little more on that? So you felt like you were able to, you use the phrase make music visible.
yeah,
Was it the music first and then your expression of it through your body? Is that the essence of it?
yeah, I think so. The pianist for Goldberg on stage, maybe I could put it this way. The pianist is constrained by our movements, so they can't do their full, whatever they're feeling in that moment kind of interpretation. They're a little handcuffed. But for us on stage, whatever the tempo is, like, we don't get to generate the tempo, but how you hear and adjust, and watching different bodies do the same solo. There's a very beautiful, I think it's Variation 7. It's a female solo that is just lovely, and it's really introspective. And actually, Robbins has a framework of cast members on the stage in a semicircle behind her, watching her, a few in the front. It's a really lovely passage, and it's a little devotional, it's a little playful, it's all over the place, but it's really expressive of a particular dancer. And watching every different dancer do that solo, I always think it's just like reading somebody.
Yes.
So I feel like it comes from the music. It's like an external prompt to put your personality or your read. That's where the artistry comes in, how you're hearing that, and how
Yes.
you have to be on the music. But everyone watching different people do things is their interpretation of music and how they're hearing something. I think,
Yes.
I don't know if that makes sense, but
It does. I talk about this a lot in these interviews about what makes a good performance of Bach, because there's very little instruction given to the performers. There's often no tempo markings, there's no accents, and it's a wide open canvas. And which is why you can have very highly varied performances. And fast doesn't necessarily always work. Slow doesn't necessarily always work, but the certain personal expression that people are able to put through these notes works often. And when it does, it's incredible. And I have not gotten to the bottom of what that is. How does that work? And I'm coming closer with music. I still don't really quite get it. Why do certain people sound the way they do? I mean, you can break it down technically, but there's interpretation of it. I guess I can put this to you again. How do you think that you're able to make that interpretation with highly choreographed steps and a director who's telling you, this is what I want to see? How does Faye still come through in those moments?
yeah, I think if you think about singing, it's a similar thing. If you're in part 2 of Goldberg and you're in the giant core, everyone has to a little bit more, be more militant about how they're interpreting the notes. That's just what's required of that moment. If you're in the Waltz of the Flowers and you're a flower, it's like, you better all feel this turn in this exact way, kind of a thing. But then if you're the soloist, and really every role in part 1 of the Goldberg ballet is full license to make your mark, hear it how you want to hear it, put your own coloring on the step. It's like a singer who has license to hold something a little too long and then catch up, elide the next phrase and do whatever. So the poor Goldberg pianist is not able to do that, but we are on stage. If you're really hitting a balance, you can stay in it and you can then catch up in the next phrase. Or if you want to, there's some dancers are considered incredibly musical, and it means they're not on the note. It means they always know where the note is, but they're not on it. They're phrasing over it. Kieran Nichols, Tyler Peck currently. There are some, Suzanne Farrell, probably the most famous. These people who can play with the music, show you a different like stretch out or elide a phrase as they see fit in the moment. It's like today's a little this, tomorrow's a little that. And I think those are the best performers.
Yes.
And I was always really the most excited to get to be in a solo or a part where I had the freedom to do my read on something. So there's definitely like rank and structure comes into it. Barocco, though, for example, that's one of the most mathematical ballets, and there is leeway for the leads a little bit, but they correspond tightly. They're two women, and each one corresponds to the first and second violin, and they have to be on it too. And it's just a very, for the most part, very fast piece too. So you don't want to do something too musically, showy and get on the next person's note, because then the structure of that piece is ruined. But Goldberg and a lot of Robbins really is very human and very personality based. And I think a lot of his stuff is to solo piano. That was a forte for him. And solo piano is definitely a place, not in the ballet world for the pianist, but for the dancers to be like a pianist in a concert setting and really just do your versus the whole orchestra trying to be together. It works similarly to actual musical instruments, I think. It's just we're riding these tempi that we don't control, but we still then, how we're processing and hearing can be musical or non-musical within those frameworks.
Yeah, definitely. I'd like to talk about one of your former colleagues who I thought was one of the more magical dancers I saw, and that's Wendy Whalen, who I think pulled off something that I'd never really seen before. It looked like she was like not made of substance. It's like she got this thing where she looked like she was a feather.
Yeah.
I've never talked to anyone who could explain that. I mean, do you have any insight about how she was able to pull any of that off?
She was what an incredible dancer, what a legend. She was so strong. And I was just thinking about Wendy in that last, talking about the more musical dancers. Wendy was a very musical dancer, but she was not doing the diva, like I'm going to bend time in this way, like I was just speaking about. She was boiling things down to the essence. She was going for a kind of like purity of score and of line and of intent that, I haven't seen before or since. I think of her renditions of the Four Temperaments, Agon, a lot of these famous Balanchine black and white ballets that are usually very spare, very atonal. Wendy, I feel like she laid down the perfect tracks of those. She figured out exactly Symphony in 3 movements. It's another Stravinsky piece. She figured out the platonic ideal of that piece, and she went for that every show. So she was not going to bend a note. She was not going to overhold a balance. She was just going to give you the essential Agon, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's a different thing, but
pre-planned, but that it took artistry in the preparation, and then she executed at an extremely high level.
One of the most focused artists I've ever known, like a lovely woman, but just everything was about the stage and turning in that textbook I remember thinking like, I don't even think her pinky finger has been in a different place, in different subsequent performances of Agon. I would watch and just marvel at like, she and Jacques Soto have done this probably identically down to where they're standing on the stage, the breath that they're taking. She homed in on her ideal rendition of a dance, and she was able to just repeat it. And it was extraordinary. I mean, it's a different thing. She was also great in the Goldberg Variations, but it's a different thing than I was talking about before.
Yes.
No, that's impressive. Just the opposite. And that answers a little too about how do you carve out your own artistry within these things. That is a way as
Right.
well.
Yeah, you do your prep ahead of time. I wouldn't want to hear that
Very
from
exacting way. Yeah.
I wouldn't want to hear that from a jazz musician. It works in ballet, right?
Yes, it does. Yeah.
Faye, this has been great. I'd love to ask if there's what you've been listening to lately. What are some albums that you're either coming back to from a long time ago or something new? It doesn't have to be classical, anything that we can share with the listeners looking for something different.
Oh my goodness. I have to say, I'm a little high on a concert I saw this week. I saw Mavis Staples.
Oh, yeah.
It was just amazing at 87. Just her instrument is still just so robust, and she didn't have the breath control that she had before. She couldn't do everything, but it was like just such an amazing example of an artistic aging that was like just beautifully done, very gracious and very powerful. Yeah, she didn't always have the power behind her voice that she did have, but she could, and she went to it when she needed it, and it was very smart and very meaningful in the context of activism right now, and just everything, the history that came with her. And she spoke of Martin Luther King and it was just an amazing show.
That's cool. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's what I'm excited about this week. I was just thinking about Goldberg all week, thinking of there are not a lot of choreographers seem to have avoided Bach. I think for that reason of it's so perfect and so pure, but a lot of people have some of their most famous dances to Bach. So I feel like maybe we should mention that on this show.
Yes. Who else might we want to catch if it's ever performed anywhere?
Paul Taylor's Esplanade, that's pretty much his signature work. And that's to the same music as Concerto Barocco, as well as Violin Concerto No. 2 in E major. So that's his signature dance is also Bach. And it's more like part 1 of Robbins Goldberg, where it's crawling, it's baseball slides, it's very pedestrian and very silly at times and kind of fun. Just interesting that Balanchine, Taylor, a lot of people, Robbins, have some of their best known dances to Bach. I think is Promethean Fire is another big Paul Taylor piece that was made. It's his September 11th response ballet, and it's a very moving dance. Mark Morris did a collaboration with Yo-Yo Ma, Falling Downstairs, to, I think it's the 3rd unaccompanied cello suite. So these are big pieces in the dance world, and they're all to Bach, even though these choreographers really didn't touch Bach a lot outside of that. And I think it's interesting. Maybe more dance makers should try more Bach.
Yeah.
But I think there's something too, because I've seen a lot of lesser dances to Bach. It can be a trap.
Where does it fail? Yeah.
I think it's just so simple and pure, really, that if you go too far in either direction, it's just going to feel hokey. You know what I mean? If you try to make it overly complicated, it feels disingenuous. And if you try to make it way too simple, it also feels disingenuous. I don't know. It's like Bach is it's simple, but it's really not, I mean, you know that, but you know that better than I do. But I think I don't know. It seems to be a pitfall of over or under complicating Bach. You have to just nail it. And
got a Goldilocks.
It's a Goldilocks zone.
Yeah.
He's a Goldilocks composer. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you can catch Faye's writing at the Fjord Review. Are you publishing anywhere else lately?
I write a little bit for Airmail. I've been doing archival stuff with the George Balanchine Foundation.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, little bits here and there.
But thank you for coming today and sharing your experience about dancing Bach. This is a conversation I really wanted to have.
Thank you for having me. This was a pleasure.